This episode of Behind the Regs is sponsored by Plan Checker. Plan Checker is a UK-based digital platform designed to connect clients with verified building control and construction professionals, making it easier to find the right expertise at the right time for the right job. It doesn't replace building control bodies, and it doesn't carry out restricted activities or functions. It simply creates clearer, more transparent access to the professionals working across the industry. If you're a professional, a client, or part of the wider built environment sector, you can learn more or sign up at planchecker.co.uk.
Welcome to the Behind the Regs podcast. This is episode 6. I'm Jack, and I have my co-host Nader with me. Today we have Carrie, who is joining us and is going to give us a brief introduction of her background, working as an RBI, and also has involvement in building control teachings at university level. If you'd like to give us a bit of an intro on that and tell us how you got into your role and what you've been doing.
So I've been working in building control, say about 10, 11 years now. I came in as a technical admin, basically overheard in the office that they were looking at doing some internal training programs. And I was just like, how do I get on board with that? I had no idea. I'll be honest, I had no idea what on earth I was volunteering myself for. But I kind of liked what I was seeing with the colleagues. There was a really good sense of like team spirit within the office that I trained in. And they were like, yeah, why not give it a go? And I'm really grateful for them giving me the opportunity. Actually, a chap called Owen Edwards, who I'm working with again now, with a bit of luck. He was the one that gave me the opportunity to crack on. I started doing a degree at Birmingham in 2016. Graduated 2020, which was a very interesting year to graduate. That's a whole different story. But yeah, so I was doing day release, studying, as well as obviously doing my full-time building control job. Yeah, that's where I came from. Absolutely loving it. Obviously, anyone who's familiar with building control knows that the last few years have been an absolute challenge. But I feel like I've really grown my wings and earned my stripes in the last few years. Because anyone who's familiar with me, I like to chuck myself out there on LinkedIn, especially. Create articles about things that normally come up in conversation or with something I've identified somewhere. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like a really good thing that I can explore. So I'll create like an article based on my findings, my experience, plus any regulatory background that I can find, and basically create like a free-for-all that people to like just talk about different things that come up in building control, and also sort of like general construction issues that may be a thing, as well as regulatory updates as well, because I do appreciate it is an absolute minefield trying to stay up to date. Like literally it's a full-time job. So, not to use Tesco's little catchphrase, but every little helps, giving little tidbits for people to go away and do their own research. Through that as well, I've also been asked to do some associate lecturing with Sheffield Hallam. So I helped them with their building control module, because obviously it's quite hard to deliver that with someone who's out of industry, but obviously with someone who's in industry, they can provide some of the up-to-date information. As I sort of alluded to, it's a full-time job trying to get all the up-to-date information with building control. And that's pretty much where I am. I love multitasking. I love finding out new things. I love learning things. Happy to be proven wrong, but also love it when I'm right. I'm happy to just talk about, all sorts of things that I find. So keeping the conversation going. That's pretty much me. In a nutshell. This is me in a nutshell.
So with LinkedIn, then you've got Carrie's Compliance Corner as well. So that is your blog then, is it? Or do you have an external blog, or is it just on LinkedIn?
No, it's just on there. It started off as a bit of fun, and then I realised actually it's getting quite a lot of traction. So I created a little cartoon of me in my little Spider-Man suit. But yeah, because I was like, I want to be like your friendly neighbourhood RBI, someone who obviously I can't overstep collaboration in terms of design and things like that, but where I can help, I will try and help. So I've sort of taken that persona onto LinkedIn, just because I've seen quite a few people starting different conversations, which is really good to see. People of all different qualifications and levels just stepping out and putting themselves out there and getting themselves a profile in the building control industry. It's just, I'm just really happy to be part of it. And it seems to be quite successful. I've got literally articles scheduled until like February next year. I've got loads.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Busy then.
Yeah.
In one of your most recent articles, you mentioned about the duty holders and RBI's competence. Do you think that could have been the wrong way around, where the competence of duty holders could really been a bit more put at the front rather than RBI's?
100%, without wanting to eradicate my industry, because obviously that is not in my interest or anyone in this room's interest. But technically, if all duty holders were competent, we wouldn't even need. We're literally a backstop. So I see having assessed us for our competence as the last person checking it is a bit back to front. Like, obviously, the duty holders, your client, your principal designer, principal contractor, they are the ones who are ultimately responsible for complying with the building regs. So I don't understand why they weren't challenged first and being made to validate their competence, because that would make a larger impact, I would feel, within the construction industry, rather than checking the checkers, who are supposed to be, the last point of call. But, I'm not in that position of power.
With that in mind,
It's an interesting choice.
yeah, with that in mind, what's your thoughts on building notices then? Because if you've got principal designers who are providing what's supposed to be a compliant design, is a building notice really still something that should exist in the industry?
I mean, in my opinion, no. But again, that's probably why I'm not in a position of power, because I might be a little bit like, get rid of it. I personally don't agree with them because it puts too much onus on the RBI. And again, we're not in a position where we're enabled to provide any design advice. It's very risky. Personally, if I was going to be working on a project, or I was, the client on a project, which I was going to put forward with a building notice, I'd like a bit of confidence that I know it's definitely going to comply before it gets to site, because obviously there's the risk that, you built it, your RBI comes out and goes, actually, your footings look wrong, can't tell you what to do, but it looks wrong, off you go, fix it. That's a risk. But I would like to see them eradicated personally, because it's not in the spirit of what the Building Safety Act wants, I don't think. My
What do you
opinion
think
only.
competence looks like in practical terms from like a designer or a contractor?
Interesting question. I would like to see them presenting the correct information that kind of gives me the confidence that they know what they're talking about. Just to put that into a little bit of context, I'm still finding that I'm getting people, especially when it comes to initial plan assessment, they'll just be submitting a raft of information with no direction. And it's like, well, where's the written commentary to discuss how I shouldn't have to pull it apart and interrogate it and make a decision myself. You should be informing me. And I then go, yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. No, I don't quite agree with that. I need a bit further information. And then, we can do the signposting after that if they don't understand. But it still feels like they're still just kind of going, check everything, and they'll check it. And again, with like plan check updates, obviously we set out specific criteria that we need, and then they'll just deluge you with a bunch of drawings, and it's like, well, that's not filling me with any confidence that you understand what exactly I'm asking you. So for me, competence, especially from the designer side, would be for them to pick out what information they know I'm going to need, and then when I ask the question, provide me that, and specifically the section and a written commentary, because it's not up to me to interrogate it and go, I think that's what they mean. Like, as an example, I was sent a deviation from Part K, and they said, oh, we're going to deviate and do this. And I was like, well, that's great, but you need to tell me why you're doing that. I'm not going to just accept it because you're asking for it. You need to tell me why. And it's just that bit of education around what the requirements are and how they need to communicate with us. Which, incidentally, I have an article coming out in January about how to communicate with RBIs. Watch this space. Not to do any personal advertising. Soz.
Do you think people are starting to use AI a bit more to try and do the work for them?
I have spotted that with a couple, and I have pulled them up and said, look, that's an excellent thing from ChatGPT. However, what is your opinion?
Yeah,
Because I can
I've
recognize some of the
agree.
things that ChatGPT pulls out, and it's like, that's excellent. That's very factual. However, is that based on the actual material you've installed? Is that based on the actual specification, or is that just something you've put in there? I'd like to know that you understand.
Yeah, I've
So, yeah.
challenged ChatGPT many times, just asking some obvious questions just to try and find out, does it actually know the answers, or is it just going to put out anything which it comes across? But with material change use, part K isn't in. ChatGPT believes it is. And then when I said that's not right, they go, oh yeah, you're right. And you think, well, if people are using this to try and comply with the building regulations, it's not a good start for them. And again, with the building notice, if people are going to start relying on AI, you need to be looking at speaking to the right people involved to make sure you're getting good compliant advice.
Or they just get competent and learn.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one without sounding really sassy. But it's just like,
ChatGPT is an interesting one, though. Very interesting. No one can deny, like most of us use AI, whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's something else like Claude or any of these things. But all of them, they got disclaimers saying that obviously whatever information they chunk out is not necessarily all the time factual or true. And that's the problem with people using it without going back and verifying that that information is actually true. If people are start using it to demonstrate compliance, I think it would be quite difficult because they don't understand to connect the interpretations with the actual regulation. That's something that AI still is not capable of doing.
At least our jobs are safe.
I think for now, until they are trained to actually use the interpretations properly and connect them with the regulations and the sections and be able to, because all of us on this podcast, no one understand that not a single piece of legislation we depend on. They all connect to each other. In the registered building control approval regulation, it always refers to the principal regulation. Sometimes people don't understand what that principal regulation is. It's the building regulation 2010 itself. And I've not used an AI application or module that actually understood that. It's quite difficult. It's quite dangerous that people are using it. And yeah, I did receive a few ChatGPT responses and justifications that I've questioned really and scrutinized. But Carrie, registrations, class structure, and the impact of that. What's your genuine opinion about the registration process itself and the need for people carrying out that restricted activity becoming registered building inspectors rather than before they were called building control surveyors. Now they are registered building inspectors. How has the registration genuinely changed the way an RBI or a building control surveyor, as they used to be called, how did the registration genuinely change the way that those people work day to day, in your opinion?
So for me, I feel it's a double-edged sword. There's the positives and then obviously it's the negatives, which I'll talk about in both detail. So positives, obviously we're all regulated now, which is good and bad. We've proven our competence. So I feel like, especially for someone like myself, without being chairman of the obvious, I'm a female, I'm quite young, but especially someone in my position, I feel like I've had to not only just prove myself initially, I've had to like double prove myself. I felt like I've been scrutinized heavier than, say, some older male peers. One example I will use, when I was first going out onto sites, I went out with a male colleague of mine who was an older gentleman, without sounding derogatory or horrible. I introduced myself to the contractor and said, "Hi, I'm Carrie, I'm the lead surveyor." And he completely ignored my hand and took my colleague's hand and shook it. And I was like, okay, that was something. So that was hard. But now I've gone through this horrible mill, which has been on fire and had ever decreasing circles. I feel like no one can challenge that I know what I know. Like, I know that I've done it the proper routes. I've submitted the correct materials. It was all work that I've genuinely done myself. And no one can take that away from me. So I know that I've achieved that. So for me, it's eradicated a bit of imposter syndrome. because it's something I carried along with me for quite a long time. As I say, being challenged as a younger female, also working in situations where, as a female, there was like how do I say, an expectation that I would stay in an admin role. There was times that I had to juggle an admin role alongside doing an inspector's role, which I don't see any male colleagues having had to do that. So I feel like I've had extra challenges that potentially male peers. Again, I haven't lived a parallel where I came through as a male either, so I can't say, obviously, hand on my heart, that it's different. But from what I've seen in comparison, it looks like I've had a rockier journey. And you know what? I've come out with a Class 2F. I'm about to go in for my 3G3A. I've been invited to do a podcast like this, which is genuinely incredibly flattered to do it. I've worked on other things. I worked with the ICM. I've been invited to a roundtable discussion earlier this year. And I also work with universities such as Sheffield Hallam, and I am invited regularly into places like Leeds Beckett to talk about building regs updates. And I'm like, you know what? Actually, I do know my stuff. And it's like getting that registration has given me that real sense of credibility and validity that I've achieved that, and no one could take that away. We have lost a lot of really good, valuable individuals in the industry because of the process. There's people who at the other end of the spectrum where they've been in building control for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and they're like, you know what, I've only got a couple of years left before I retire. You know, why would I go through all this stress just for a few more years worth of work? I'll either go off and be a consultant, which ironically you don't need to be qualified to improve your competence for, which again is another topic I possibly move on to after this.
Yeah.
They can do that for a similar sort of salary, or they can just go and do something else, which obviously is a lot less stress and a lot less scrutinized, because there's a lot of scrutiny, which again has its double-edged sword, because you know that you've done everything correctly when you've passed your audit and there's nothing you know what, actually I'm squeaky clean, no flies on me, excellent. But there is the extra stress of being audited, having the public look at you, and then you've obviously got like potentially duty holders who still don't understand that our role has changed. Another challenge that I found has been with projects that are in flight during the BSA impact, where they don't understand that although historically when there is a legislative change, the initial notice or whatever is in place would lock in the legislation and guidance of that time, this is completely different. Our role has changed. So there's been a bit of combativeness around, why do I have to now do all these things? Why won't you give me design advice? Why aren't you doing trackers? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you calling out every 2 weeks and telling me all this? And it's like, well, no, my job has now changed. I'm now legally bound within the RBI Code of Conduct to perform this function. And regardless of whether the initial notice was served 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 1 month before the Building Safety Act came in, that has now changed. And, I can't change that. So that's been a challenge. And so as I say, there's pluses, there's minuses, there's a lot less of us. That means that we're very valuable as personnel, which is obviously a benefit. However, the stress that comes with that is quite a lot. And I'm not sure that was really taken into account when the powers that be considered the validation process and potentially the amount of fallout. Like, I'm sure you're not unfamiliar with the fact that we're probably going to have another atrophy of the industry in about 2 years' time when we have to go through the registration process again. So, that's weighing on people's minds. They're like, how many more registrations do I think I counted up. I've got about 20 more registrations till I officially reach the current retirement age, which by the time I get there's probably going to be another 50 registrations. And it's like, oh my goodness me.
A lot of people will do the math now.
Exactly. There's a few people, well, as you say, pretty much everyone will probably be doing the math and thinking, you know what, how many more times do I want to do this? And that's dangerous, because I think the last few years has proven that we are still incredibly valuable to the industry. We've got a lot of knowledge, we've got a lot of experience. And whilst we can't use it potentially in the way that the industry might like us to, i.e. giving guidance, there's other ways we can, such as having these conversations, going and, upskilling people where we can, because, that's one of the probably less positive parts about the role that a lot of us enjoyed, the interaction, the collaboration, being part of the team, working through solutions. And obviously that part's gone.
It's now more of knowledge sharing than design advice. I think that is the word that I would prefer to use. Do you think the class structure properly reflects real world competency, or does it create artificial limitations?
That's a good question. I think a little bit of both, especially now that there's like an introduction of potentially Class 2Fs being able to work on 3G, 3H buildings. where it can be sectioned
Yeah,
off, and it's
yeah.
like,
And to see able to carry out couple of
yeah,
things on high risk buildings.
it's
Yeah,
it's a peculiar one because obviously while that section might be sectioned off, there will be other parts that will still apply for that higher class 3, such as sprinkler systems, higher periods of fire resistance. If I was a class 2 and I went out and I went, let's say, pick an example of I'm going to do a commercial unit, ground floor of a 3-tier building, I've been okay to do it because internal protocols and all these other matrices that have been created, but I might not recognize that the sprinkler system might have been removed. That's dangerous. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
So looking ahead, what worries or encourages you about re-registration cycle in the future? I know you probably might have already answered that, but what worries you the most and what encourages you the most about these cycles?
Well, I'm hoping the re-registration won't be quite as troublesome as the registration. Because, yeah, we were given a very short period of time to pull everything out of the hat and no one really knew. It was the blind leading the blind. So at least this time we've got a little white stick. We know we can feel around in the dark. We kind of know where we're going. And there might even be a little light at the end of the tunnel that isn't a train this time. So there is that. And again, it's that personal validation that you know that you've achieved that and you've answered those questions and you know that you can do it, so you can deliver that function confidently. So
If you were to change the registration process, what do you think you'd look to do differently? Obviously, we've got an exam route, we've got interview routes with portfolios. What do you think could be changed to make it a bit more appealing to people to re-register without losing the intention of what it's for, of proving competence? Is there an alternative way which is not going to put people off and maybe entice people to come back into it?
that's another good question. I mean, personally, I do like the fact that there are 3 entirely different routes because, for example, I'm quite academic. I quite like doing the portfolio. I'm actually going to go through CABE for my re-registration. So I quite like that. But then I do appreciate that some people might not like writing out reams and reams. So then the exam route is quite a positive and it's also open book and you got a longer amount of time. So that I think is quite good that there are those 3 alternative options. I can't think of a 4th option that would be better than having those 3 options. But the one thing I would change would be scratch the registration date and the revalidation date. Let's have one date. I know I spoke to someone, I can't remember who it was, but they were sort of equating the registration date and the qualification date to an MOT and your insurance dates or something with the car. And it's like, well, that's great, but for your MOT, you don't have to prepare a whole portfolio or something. So it's not quite the same as remembering 2 dates. There's 2 different things you have to remember. And it's like, our job is complicated enough. Can't they simplify that and just make you just requalify and you revalidate on the same date? I don't know if that's just me who thinks that. I just feel like it's needlessly complicated. It's not like the most complex thing in the world, but we all know that our job is horrendously complicated as it is, and literally everything we do is scrutinized, even down to every email we scrutinized. It's like, could they not just make one part of it a bit more simple? Please, please.
Yeah. I've been trying to think of what other different ways there could be. And the only thing I could really come up with is a sort of hybrid version of the registration where you do part of a technical exam as such, maybe a plan checking aspect of it, if you're doing a plan check, and then have an interview at the end to discuss any various bits, discuss bits of legislation or discuss types of projects you've been involved in and what issues you've had and how they were dealt with. I don't know, there's
That's a good idea, Jack, to be fair.
copyright that now for us. Yeah.
Calvary route.
There's always the Calvary route. Doesn't always work.
Calvary route.
99% of the time it does.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Carrie, the golden thread, what's your thoughts about that? Reality versus expectation.
I mean, obviously it predominantly applies to HRBs, but what people, duty holders, I'm finding and not understanding that it still relates to the smallest project. Like, we still need all the information in. like I sort of alluded to earlier about the plan checks, where they'll just send us some totally random drawings that don't relate to pretty much anything that we need to answer. You send out your plan check, and then they'll send you back an absolute raft of, again, completely unrelated documents. And it's like, we need to have it in the file to show, to evidence. And it's like, especially when it's not a building notice job and they'll get in this information to you at an incredibly late stage. And it's like, you're technically getting us to operate under a building notice. And it's getting that understanding of when we need the information and what specific information we need. And, you know, if it's audited and it's found out that we only got certain documents heading towards completion, it's like, well, technically we should have, there's no understanding, I don't think, for the smaller projects of people thinking how the Building Safety Act applies to the smaller project. And when I say smaller project, I don't even mean like necessarily like your small extension, down to like smaller commercial jobs, or even, you know, a larger commercial job, which isn't an HRB. There's still a bit of a misunderstanding, sorry, around what information we need and what stages we need the information, and making sure it is all in place.
So I'm assuming, obviously, from what you've just said now, that you're getting still a lot of people on site not really understanding what their duties are, or not even aware of any change. I've faced it myself earlier today, to be fair. Contractor wanting me to tell him what to do everywhere. Even planning matters as well, because I come from an architectural background and I dealt with a lot of planning applications before. So some of the questions I knew it was planning related, and I was like, no, it's nothing to do. It's nothing to do with building control. So obviously you yourself as well, you're experiencing a lot of this on site, that especially I would say that this is more common with small domestic projects, not maybe large. Sometimes medium scale commercial ones as well, or medium scale projects like conversion of old offices to maybe 6, 4, 5 flats, whatever. Sometimes the people take on these projects and they think that they can do it because obviously the profits from these projects are quite lucrative, but the fact that they still don't understand that they are the ultimate responsible people for compliance. And when you tell them that, like today I asked a question, I said to the contractor, who do you think is responsible for that work after it's finished? He pointed at me. And that's it's not surprising that we're still facing it until today, and we're how many years down the line now since these new, no, I wouldn't say even new, they were, that culture has to change. And I think, yeah, all what we're doing together, spreading that knowledge, hopefully is implemented on site. This episode is sponsored by Plan Checker. Across building control and the wider construction sector, one issue keeps coming up: capacity. The work is there, the responsibility is huge, and the pressure keeps increasing. Plan Checker was built to help bridge that gap by making it easier to access independent, appropriately qualified professionals when support is genuinely needed. Whether that's for plan reviews, consultancy input, or specialist advice. It doesn't change statutory responsibility, and it doesn't interfere with regulatory rules. It simply helps people find expertise without relying on informal networks or last-minute phone calls. If you want to see how that works in practice, visit planchecker.co.uk.
Since all these changes have come in with the Building Safety Act, have you found that you've had to do a lot more Reg 21s?
I've had to do a handful. The one that I remember was at the very beginning, where I had some serious concerns, but that has diminished, and I'm sort of managing things through alternative routes now. But at the very outset, then yes, I did have some serious concerns. As I say, other than the quality of information coming through, I'm not getting the same feeling of radical incompetence and things. It's more just perfecting the process.
So do you think things are improving the longer
It's not
we go on?
improving at a pace that I think is commensurate to a excellent industry, if I'm brutally honest. It's been 2 years in place, nearly 3 years. We shouldn't still be going through the challenges that we're still going through. But as I say, to take the positives, I have seen some improvement, some quite good improvement. Like I've got a few excellent clients who literally get everything to me before I even ask, and they've literally said everything to me. And I'm like, my goodness me, you're making my job so much better. Thank you so much. Please come back. Versus some clients where it's just like pulling teeth. But as I say, as a whole, I do feel it is moving forward, but it's not quite at the pace that I would feel confident that we're where we need to be, if that makes sense.
So do you think it would be an idea to have a government register of competent principal contractors and principal designers where we can
100%.
check that
We
they
are
are suitably competent
screaming
for
for
that
that.
project? Because that will
Definitely,
save
without a shadow of doubt.
because we're all visible on a government database to see that we can be involved in certain sections of work. So to have principal contractors, principal designers, it will get rid of a lot of the incompetent.
That is, without a shadow of doubt, the best suggestion that the industry could possibly take forward. However, in practice, I think they'd be worried that everyone will do what building control has done and dissolved into a tiny little thing. And then there'd be so little people left who are willing to stand up and be counted and put their hand up and go, you know what, I can only do this type of job, or actually I can take the risk and do the higher, more complicated jobs. And they're going to be in the same situation where, we're all under so much stress where we have to take on, we have both to battle the RBI Code of Conduct, which says that we can only work on the amount of projects that we feel competent and confident to deliver the projects. But at the same time, there's only 4,500 of us in the entire country, both private and local authority. So it's like, well, no offense, but make it make sense. You tell us that we're only allowed to work on, what we feel confident on delivering, but where does that project work go if we don't deliver it? And it's like they haven't thought about things like that. And I think they're worried about that widening out into the contractor and designing world. But they've already started the ball rolling, so it's only fair that they carry on because, that is the only solution that is going to make the biggest impact. But it's going to cause earthquakes. So, yeah.
If you
I
could
think
make
it's
a
scary for them.
change, then what change would you make to the building control industry?
Another good question, Jack. That is.
It's an excellent question, and it's a really tough one because what I want to say is it's hard. It needs to be more accessible for people to come into it. But then I do appreciate that, obviously, with the new regime that we have, where a person comes in at class 1, they need physical supervision on everything they do for the first, potentially up to 3-5 years, potentially. Some people might learn incredibly fast. They might get it done within a year, especially if they've got some kind of background, like someone coming from like a commercial surveyor background or something may manage to fast track through from class 1 to class 2 within a year. But if you're getting someone coming in who's green or come from a trade background, it may take 2, 3, 5 years. And that is going to require dedicated persons supervising them physically, both on site and checking everything they do. And that's just not a resource we have as an industry. Smaller companies, for example, will just not have the resources to be able to facilitate that. Large companies, even they can only take on, let's say, maybe 5 graduates per year because that's the amount they can allocate in a large company. And that is something I'm seeing repeating across the industry. But as a whole, taking in 5 brand new, totally green personnel every year is not going to make up for the fallout we're going to have in 2 years' time when we have the re-registration and we lose potentially another 1,000 people who are approaching retirement or just go, you know what, I can make the same amount of money as a consultant or do something else with my building regs background and experience without the stress, without the pressure of having to re-register, without my name being on a register that anyone can search and see any sanctions I've got against me that's all publicly available. Laundry is all out for everyone to see. It's not the most favourable of roles. So I don't see a way of undoing all of that, unfortunately, but there does need to be a radical piece of work that happens to make it more easy for people to come into the industry. And I don't know the answer to that question.
Can you see yourself transitioning to the consultant in the future, or is that something that you don't necessarily agree with?
I've toyed with the idea, but personally, I don't agree with it. Because personally, if I'm going to be responsible for designing something, I should be competent to do so. And that, kind of goes against my personal like morals that I wouldn't have to validate myself in a competency. Secondly, if I was to go and I decided it wasn't for me, I would lose my validation and I had to start again from the bottom. And I don't like that.
Yeah.
Because you
So
have to have X amount of years experience in building control. You can't just go away for 2 years, 3 years and come back and go, oopsie, I've made a mistake.
yeah, it's
Because
going to
unless
be
you get those
controlled, so I think-
projects progressed, you've kind of shot yourself in the foot. So it's not appealing to me.
Well, it's a big risk to take. 'Cause
It's a
if
very big
you
risk.
don't like it, then it is right back to the bottom, and it's not a position you want to put yourself in when you've had to ride through it.
When you've pulled yourself up by the bleeding fingernails, no, it's not something that is attractive to me whatsoever. So fair play
So
to
you're,
anyone who does it, but yeah,
so you're
too scary.
saying it's for you it's a bit more difficult to shift from being a registered building inspector to be in a consultancy capacity, and you're thinking that if you do that, you're not going to be able to come back to being a registered building inspector.
Potentially, and also I'm stubborn. I've fought so hard to get where I am now. I've gone through 10, 11 years. I've gone through my qualifications. I've got all these things. I've achieved these things. I've got my little newsletter. I've got all these things going. And I'm like, why would I throw that away for something that as I say, I don't necessarily agree with? Because if you're going to be in a position of designing something and being responsibility ultimately for compliance of something, why would I not have to hang my hat on that? Why is there no competency validation for that? I don't understand. And again, as I say, the risk of if that is not what I want to do, then I may not have the opportunity to come back into building control. And also, as I say, I've spent so much time building up what I've got.
Do you think that nowadays that there is a clearer understanding in the industry as a whole of what the role of the RBI is, or is there still a confusion?
Sometimes it's clear. A lot of the time, I still feel like, especially as I say, for the projects that are in flight,
Can
where
you
they're
tell
like,
us what do you think the role of an RBI is from your point of view?
we're like the building police.
Oh,
Nino,
okay.
Nino.
Interesting.
with the backstop, we check things to ensure it complies. Although not to ensure, it's not our job to make sure it complies. We check the evidence they've presented, to check if it complies. We check it on site to check that they've built what they've said they're going to build, or if they've deviated, that their reflected design meets compliance. We're also there to enforce. We're also there to do other functions as well. Obviously, there's a lot of extra functions that we do, such as lots and lots of emails, lots and lots of phone calls. Obviously, those are not the things that are part of the general day job. Those aren't the restricted functions. The restricted functions being serving of notices, serving of statutory things like consultations, land assessments, site inspections. And I think there's still a bit of a discrepancy on the understanding about how much time we need to designate to those functions. And there's still like an over-reliance on tens of thousands of emails, and it's like, well, every single email I send is going to be audited, so it has to be written in a very strict fashion. And also the sending of hundreds of emails means that that's something I have to I've got a due diligence to check that. I've got an obligation to check that. So when you get a client who may assume, and it may just be because I'm super proactive and I get things done, but they sometimes feel like maybe they're my only client, which is excellent to make them feel like that. But it's like, that isn't the reality. We all have potentially hundreds of projects that we have to manage because of the limited capacity of the RBI industry. And then when you're getting hundreds of emails and lots of different correspondence and phone calls that obviously you can't track back, and text that you can't track back, and it's like, there's so many streams of information coming in at us.
So that's a lot of admin work, Carrie, then. There's
There's
a lot of
admin work in our job.
desktop work. So do you really think that because we've heard from many other individuals that the role of an RBI, in their opinion, shouldn't be the role as it was carried out before. So
No,
maybe
it
less
definitely shouldn't.
site inspections because of obviously of the more admin work that you just laid it out all right now.
Sorry.
No. So do you think that should be the route in the future? That is less presence on site, more desktop work?
And obviously, like, site inspections have to be undertaken on like a risk-based basis. So obviously, for example, if I'm doing like a large building or a multi-plot site and I've seen a couple of foundations, I may not want to visit all of them, just an example, unless they say they've seen a significant ground change or there's suddenly some drainage going through or something different that I need to see. So we can risk-base that and say maybe we'll take some photos for some of that. Another route that I'm taking is like I'm trying to funnel my phone calls into like emails. I will, if someone rings me, I will send them a text saying, please email me. Because that is something I can track. That is something I can then monitor. Whereas when you've got different channels of things coming through, like phone calls and things, it's very hard to manage the job.
No, well, it's one of those. It's always a topic where everybody's going to have a different answer of what the role of the RBI is. And unless it is clear in legislation of this is exactly what an RBI is, this is what they don't do, this is what they do, then no one's going to be any clearer. But to move on from it, because I can't talk about it anymore, you're lecturing at Sheffield Hallam. How are you finding students with being interested in coming into building control? Are you finding that once they sort of learn a bit more about building control, it sort of switches them off, or do you think they're piquing their interest, or it's something that they can see themselves doing? Or
Yeah, so most of them are already in industry or taking a gap year and have their thing, but I always try and I always do a seminar about what the life of an RBI looks like and try and promote the positives, but also be quite transparent about what the negatives are, because I'm not going to sell someone a full stream. That's just not fair. And there has been limited interest. I'm not going to say there's been loads, like out of like a cohort of maybe 30, there might be one or two who want to know a bit more about genuinely coming into the industry. So it's not reams. I've had quite, I would say maybe 10 building control students over my duration teaching. So it's not many, again, coming through. It's quite limited. And I do try and make it sound as good as I can, obviously, without falsely advertising it, because obviously there are a lot of stresses that come with the job. But, you know, for someone who can apply themselves and likes legislation and likes the challenge of having to constantly stay updated and, you know, having different communication with different types of client, it is quite a good job. But yeah, it's quite a hard sell.
yeah, it's an incredibly rewarding job. There are going to be ups and downs with it. That you're going to get that with most jobs, but I think the benefit of building control is what the main point of what we do is for keeping people safe in and around buildings. I must have said that about 50 times already in all 6 episodes of the podcast, but it never changes. That is what our role is, to keep people safe in and around buildings. So if that's not the biggest selling point to get someone wanting to do a job, I don't know what is, because as soon as I heard that, I was sold instantly. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing and people are going to be safe in and around buildings. It's an easy selling point, but the hard parts, yeah, you're always going to get that, but you'll get that with a lot of different jobs, really, won't you? I think in a few years' time, will things settle down? Well, maybe not with re-registration, unless something gets dealt with beforehand. Will BSR have a conversation and think, maybe let's look at doing a bit of a staggered approach?
Carrie, if you could give one piece of advice to RBIs navigating this new era of regulation and accountability, what would it be?
It would be to not give up. We've all been through an incredibly challenging couple of years. And that's not to say that the next few years, again, may not be challenging, but we've come so far and we're all achieving incredible things that we, you know, alongside the incredibly stressful job, we've managed to achieve these qualifications, which there's a lot to be said about that, because as you say, the rest of the industry, most of them don't have such qualifications and have such a vigorous and limited time space to get something done, but we've pulled together as an industry and we've achieved that. So I would sort of reflect on that and be like, let's make this our own. Let's push forward. Let's really drive the change, and let's just be stubborn to the end. There's so much more to be done. Like, the future is literally right there on our doorsteps. Like, we've come this far. We've made a lot of positive change. We've got a lot to be proud of. Like, there's no reason why this needs to be the end of the line. Like, nothing easy is as rewarding, if you know what I mean. Like, the fact we've all fought so hard to get this far, and we're all still here, and we're having these conversations, and I'm seeing other things similar to this cropping up left, right, and center, and it's really invigorating to see so many people putting the hand up and going above the parapet and going, you know what, let's talk about this. Let's discuss these things. It's really rewarding to see that. And I don't see why anyone wouldn't want to be a part of that, because it's just inspiring. It's really inspiring.
What would you want any duty holders who may be listening to the podcast to take away from this episode?
Tough question. There's quite a few things. I would like to see like a more concise deliverance of information to RBIs. I would like to see a better understanding of our role as RBIs, which I appreciate may be hard when we're all coming up with different definitions of RBIs. It's like, well, if we don't know, what chance does everyone else have? Goodness me. But I mean, the information is out there. Obviously, like, they do have a responsibility to comply and know the regulations. And for the longest time, probably because we've, made a rod for our own backs, we've probably been overly helpful over the last few decades in the job, which again was a very rewarding part of the job. But it's now their turn to step up and for their term to lead. Not that I'm saying our time is over, but we've got a different function to deliver now, and it's time for them to step up and lead the compliance with the regulations and the acts, rather than waiting for us to tell them what to do, which is how it's kind of felt. And it's like, yeah, it's time for them to take responsibility for their own roles without sounding horrible.
Carrie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you today. We greatly appreciate the time that you've given us, the knowledge that you've shared with us. Very generous, very insightful, very knowledgeable. So thank you for that. And we hope that people listening to this episode would find it as insightful and knowledgeable as we both did.
Thank you for coming on. And as we mentioned earlier, you have Carrie's Compliance Corner, which is on LinkedIn. So if anyone is looking for some more technical insights, it'd be definitely worth subscribing to that on LinkedIn to keep up to date. But no, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's very flattering. I'm very honoured to be part of the journey.
This episode of Behind the Regs is sponsored by Plan Checker. Plan Checker is a UK-based digital platform designed to connect clients with verified building control and construction professionals, making it easier to find the right expertise at the right time for the right job. It doesn't replace building control bodies, and it doesn't carry out restricted activities or functions. It simply creates clearer, more transparent access to the professionals working across the industry. If you're a professional, a client, or part of the wider built environment sector, you can learn more or sign up at planchecker.co.uk.